Hey folks, it's Ray with Taste Radio. Right now, I am honored to be speaking with Benjamin Chesler, who is the co-founder of Imperfect Foods. Ben, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on today.
Thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. It's kind of surreal speaking with you because Imperfect Foods has been a savior for me and my family over the past year. At the outset of COVID, it was really hard to get access to fresh, organic produce, and Imperfect Foods has just been this incredible resource for me. So really appreciate what you guys do. The thing we order most is the dried pineapple bits that you guys sell. What is the best-selling item for Imperfect Foods?
Yeah. First of all, I love the dried pineapple bits. So you made a good choice there. I would say our most popular items and bestseller items are pretty much what you'd find in a grocery store. So chicken breast, oat milk, pasta, black beans. But we have some special items that are really customer favorites. We have the dark chocolate covered broken pretzels, which are pretzels that normally kind of wouldn't go to the grocery store because they're broken. We just cover them in chocolate and send them out, and that's my personal favorite item. So yeah, we have a lot of bestsellers depending on the week.
Yeah. Your dried banana bites. Maybe it's just all of your dried fruit is great, but your dried banana bites too are really amazing. Don't tell the folks from Barnana, but I mean, I like both, but yours are really, really great as well. And they're organic too, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, our sourcing team has done a really good job over the last year, kind of bring those innovative products and looking in kind of the nooks and crannies of the food system for items that would go to waste, and coming up with creative ways to get them to market.
Oh, you've done such a great job, you and your team. It's pretty incredible because you're a pretty young guy, and you graduated from high school. What was it, 10 years ago?
Yeah, it makes me feel old, but yeah, I did graduate actually 11 years ago now.
Oh my goodness! So this is incredible. You're the co-founder of a company that had a run rate in 2020 of $500 million. You're only 11 years out of high school. It's incredible. And the high school you went to is in the town that BevNet headquarters is located in, Newton, Massachusetts, which is really cool. You graduated from Newton South High. How was your experience? Are you originally from Newton?
Yeah, grew up in Newton. Both parents still living in Newton, and I go back there frequently. It was a pretty amazing place to grow up.
Your activism in high school, it feels like you were sort of ahead of the curve with community activism and getting involved, getting into the game, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I think my parents instilled in me a pretty good sense of social justice, and I was involved in some political and nonprofit work in high school. But it was really actually, I took a year after high school. I guess they'd call it a gap year now, before I went to college, and that's where kind of the roots of Imperfect and the Food Recovery Network, which I'll talk about, were born. I ended up in the DC, Maryland area. And somehow ended up on the campus of the University of Maryland. And that's where I kind of collided paths coincidentally. And that's another long story with my future co-founder, Ben Simon. And he was a student at the University of Maryland and had basically noticed that there was a huge amount of food going to waste on the college dining hall, like trays of pasta, like salad, pizza, lasagna, bread was all just going to waste and getting thrown out at the end of the day. At the same time, there was a huge amount of kind of insecurity, food insecurity in the community. And it seems silly that these two problems existed side by side. And so he kind of approached me with the idea, what if we recovered this food that would normally go to waste and instead had students package it up and donate it down to meal sites in the community? And I said, that's a great idea. And we helped him get started. And then I got to Brown University the next year, and he gave me a call and said, we've recovered 50,000 pounds of produce. This has been super successful. Do you want to start something at Brown? I said, sure. And so we started chapter at Brown, and then kind of the next is a little bit of a history, but over the next 4 years, we grew that nonprofit, the Food Recovery Network, to 250 colleges across the country. And I can talk a little bit more if you want, but that's kind of where we got our start in food waste activism, and eventually through a chain of events led to the founding of Imperfect Foods.
And to be clear, you're talking about good, usable food. You're not talking about food that was close to its expiration date or bad in any way. It was just food on college campuses that was served in dining halls and just not consumed by students, right?
Yeah. And this wasn't even food. This wasn't food that went onto your plate. We had to compost that. This was like they're forecasting a pretty complex demand problem of how many students are going to eat at the dining hall today. And the last thing you want to do, like at any buffet, is run out of food. And so they might have baked, 10 trays of lasagna, but only 8 got eaten. And what do you do with those 2 trays? And sometimes they try and reuse it, but a lot of times at the end of the day, they just toss it out. And so this was perfectly good, usually ready to eat food, which actually the soup kitchens and homeless shelters really loved because they could just serve it right up after heating it up. So yeah, perfectly good food that was getting thrown out.
Can I just ask what might sound like a dumb question? Why was no one doing this before?
Yeah, there were a few reasons. And actually, I remember when I told some other students at Brown that I was going to talk to dining services about this, I got all sorts of responses like, oh, someone had tried that before and it didn't work, or there's liability, like they could get sued, or like we don't trust students to do it. And I remember when I walked into dining services and said, here's the pitch, here's how we're going to do it. They said, this is awesome. We'd love to do it, but we don't have the resources and no one's ever approached us. So now that you're bringing like the power of student volunteers to do it, we can do it. I think a lot of it was just misinformation and a kind of an action bias problem where no one wanted to be the person to do it.
So how much of the work that you were doing with Food Recovery Network allowed you to understand the sort of operational challenges of running a company, or at least starting a company like Imperfect Foods?
Yeah, I would say a lot of it, I'd say we got some experience from the operational perspective of just how to safely transport food. But also, back then I like to say it was before food waste was really a sexy topic. And so we'd fly to these conferences all over the world and there'd be like the same 10 people showing up no matter where you were. Like it was we called ourselves the food waste warriors. It was a very small group of people. And so we got to know some of the, I guess I say experts, right? And authors in the field because it was a small community. And they were the ones who originally pointed us to the problem of food going to waste on the farms. And so it was through our involvement in that community that we got to know the problem of produce going to waste.
Okay, so it's one thing to go to the head of dining services and say, hey, I have this idea. And it's a good one, and we have the resources, we have the capability to execute upon this idea. It's another thing to go to investors and ask for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, and say, hey, we have this idea to commercialize essentially the problem of food waste. That's a pretty ambitious mission, and it's a pretty ambitious business concept. What was your initial pitch? Like, how did you start? What was the first thing that you had to do to get this thing off the ground?
Yeah, for sure. And that first round of capital was definitely the hardest round of capital we've ever raised, partly because we had no idea what we were doing. But if you look at it from someone else's perspective, I mean, we were a bunch of 22-year-old college kids that said, hey, we're raising $500,000 to take ugly produce and sell it to people, right? And I'm not sure if I would have funded that, to be honest. We probably pitched 50, 100 people. I vividly remember we had this pitch meeting that a friend of a friend had set up, and it was virtual. I was in Providence, and I think the investor was in Napa Valley in California. And it was a Friday afternoon, and the first meeting had gone well. And I won't name who this is, but the first meeting had gone well, and we were super excited for this. And he's sitting on like a porch, like beautiful sunny day, sipping wine, and we're pitching him, and he just goes, it's just not interesting to me. He's like, I just don't think it's an interesting idea. Like, I'm sorry. And so like, we're like, okay, this is going to be harder than we thought it was going to be. But we were very lucky to have a group called Gratitude Railroad, which was kind of a socially conscious investing group. That was our very first check and believed in us. But we did all the things you do. We put together a deck. We entered some pitch competitions. We made lists of investors. I would say if I had a piece of advice on early stage investing is every time you get a no, ask for referrals. I would say every investor who invested in us was somebody who got referred to us by somebody who said no, said, no, it's not a fit for our fund, but why don't you talk to these 3 people? And one of them invested. So that's the advice I would give.
That's great advice, and thank you for sharing it. When you finally got a yes, what was the part of the pitch that really resonated most with that investor? What was the quote unquote sexiest part of your deck?
Yeah, I think it was this kind of like arbitrage opportunity where we could get produce that tasted the same and was the same quality as what you could find in a grocery store, was better for the planet because it was reducing food waste, and it was 30% more affordable than you'd find at the grocery store. So it was like this win-win-win where like the farmers win, the planet wins, and the customer wins. And I think the fact that like you have that, you don't have to choose, is really what got the investors excited.
So you were not just one of the co-founders, you were the first chief operating officer of Imperfect Foods. Given the complexities of the business, I wonder how you went about creating systems that would provide a solid foundation for the company as it scaled.
It was definitely a challenge, especially because like we were fairly young and first time people managers. And so I would say it's all about finding what works and then implementing a system behind that. I don't really subscribe to the belief that you should put in software and that's going to solve your problems. I think you should figure out what happens naturally. So like, okay, well, we have to label the racks in the warehouse. Okay, or like we have to have 3 shifts for this reason, and then you kind of turn it into a process to operationalize it and systemize it. I will say I don't think we were always the best in the early days at creating these scalable processes, but you're forced to when you go through hyper growth, because we went from managing 5 people where everyone's in a room together to managing 1,000 people across 6 facilities. And all of a sudden, all right, well, how do you get the messages out? What's the standard operating procedure? So a lot of it is really finding best practices and then making sure you document them.
Speaking with many entrepreneurs, operations can sometimes be the most challenging part of what they do. And yes, a lot of it is sort of rinse and repeat, but in the case of Imperfect Foods, I feel like the complexity was coming from the fact that this had not been done before, that you hadn't had sort of a blueprint, you hadn't been able to sort of lean on other ways of doing this type of running this type of company. Were you able to draw upon how other companies approach the kind of systems that you put in place? I mean, did you have any influences that really helped you as you were starting out?
Yeah, I would say sometimes we were able to draw on other companies because what we were doing was similar, and sometimes it was new. So like we're not the first people to handle produce, for example, right? And so we could draw on some of those experienced produce companies that we really did in terms of how to maintain the cold chain, keep the product fresh. But at the same time, we were also dealing with things that were new, which is like we weren't buying oranges every week. We were talking to the farms in real time in terms of what do they have that was going to be wasted that week. And so we had to deal with the supply chain that was changing every week. So we had to develop new systems, for example, to figure out how to get that information concisely from the farmer, then build it into a demand plan and get it out to the customer. And so certain things we relied on kind of companies that were out there, and certain things we had to build from the ground up. I would say we had a few main influences, although we can talk about it a little bit later. Trader Joe's was one of our big influencers when it comes to how we think about product assortment, especially once we went beyond produce to grocery, and also just how to treat customers right.
Well, treating customers right a lot of times means being consistent in how you service those customers.
Yeah, I really think it was that combination of sustainability and affordability that you didn't have to compromise. And I think also food waste was having its kind of day in the sun in the media in terms of people becoming aware that it was a big problem that was contributing to climate change. And so we were one of the only places offering a tangible solution where you could, do something good without having to sacrifice. You talk about, okay, maybe you can buy an electric car, but it costs a little bit more, it can't go as far, right? You can get solar panels, but they're expensive. This was, I think, a solution that was attainable to anybody because it was more affordable, but it was something you could do from your home to really improve the planet. And when you talk about the consistency, I think one of the things we really tried to work on is, for example, like there might not be oranges every week, but there's always going to be 2 citruses and 3 greens, leafy greens, for example. And how can we provide that consistency to customers within a changing product array? Or we even might have like 10 suppliers of oranges so that we can guarantee there's oranges every week, even if they're coming from different farms. And so that looked very different from a grocery store, and those types of systems we have to build from the ground up.
I mentioned earlier that Imperfect Foods is not a small company. In a very short amount of time, you guys have created a business that, as I mentioned, generates $500 million annually, or at least it did in 2020, which is really remarkable. Your last two funding rounds totaled $162 million, and that took place between May 2020 and January 2021. Just insane numbers. How do you do it? How do you, approach profitability and this social mission in a way that addresses both equally? Do they have to be addressed, equally?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that we thought was so beautiful about the way that we set up the business is we really didn't have to choose in most cases. So every time someone purchased product from us, we were helping reduce food waste and helping prevent food from going to waste in the farms. And so it was basically this mission, which is like, just the more we sell and the more profitable we could be, the more we could help the environment. And I think that was what was so great about it, is it wasn't like this charitable thing we did on the side. It was built into the core of the business. And I think actually the best social enterprises and businesses with a mission do better for the kind of the triple bottom line, right? People, profit, planet all together. Because when you do have to choose, it gets kind of ugly, and it forces some really hard decisions. But I would also say that, one of the things we subscribe to here is no margin, no mission, we say, which is like our number one goal is to stay in business and keep doing the good we're doing for the world. And so if we can't be profitable and we can't be growing, we're not going to be doing any good for anybody. And so a great example is like packaging, right? We've often had to put more packaging in the boxes, and it would obviously be the most environmentally sustainable if we put nothing in the boxes, right? Just a cardboard box. But if you're getting rotten peaches or they're getting smushed, that's creating food waste in its own right, right? And so we have to put the customer experience first in order to preserve the mission.
Yeah, and that customer experience is so important. In the times, or since the time I started using Imperfect Foods, I've had to reach out to your customer relations department a few times. Nothing significant. Maybe, some eggplant wasn't as good as I thought it might have been, or, my eggs were broken, once or twice or something like that. No big deal. But the thing that really impressed me was that your customer service was phenomenal. It was very fast, addressed the answer or addressed the problem very, very quickly. How long did it take you to realize that customer experience and customer relations had to be at the forefront of what you do? Because, and I'm guessing it's at the forefront of what you do, because it is, in my experience, and has been so great.
Yeah, for sure. I think it was probably part of our ethos early on. There were definitely times where we were growing really fast where we weren't able to keep up the standard we wanted, but it was always our goal to be the best in customer service. I mean, we're delivering your groceries, right? It's a pretty essential staple. And if it's not right, like it's a real-time problem. It's not like a package is okay if it comes 2 days late, right? If your order's supposed to come on Wednesday, it's got to come on Wednesday. And people's pain is real. Like they have to go to the store, they can't feed their family for the week if stuff doesn't come on time and in the right condition. And so I think from the beginning, we knew that customer service had to be something you could trust. And I think the second thing is with imperfect, produce, people were skeptical, right? Like, is this going to taste as good? This is ugly, but is it also bad quality? And so by having that level of service that was top notch, we could assure people that if there was a problem, we take care of it. I mean, I think the things that broke my heart, I remember early on, someone would say, oh, this peach was rotten, but that's because it's imperfect. And it's like, no, I want you to write in and tell me about that, because the whole point is it looks different on the outside, but it tastes the same on the inside. And if you're getting produce that doesn't live up to your standards, we want to hear about it so we can improve.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really great point, which is, that consumers are expecting high quality, regardless of the fact that it might be a little ugly or it might be misshapen or missized or whatnot. Just because that watermelon has a scar in it, the inside of the watermelon is still going to be beautiful, or at least it should be. So communicating quality, as you mentioned, I think is a foremost, is a priority for the company. But doubling down on that quality, as people are choosing between Imperfect and, say, a Whole Foods or a Trader Joe's or what have you, do you find yourself now at this point, competing might be the wrong word, but having your customers choose between an established player on the market and Imperfect Foods?
Yeah, and I think that was always the choice. I mean, we weren't going to increase the amount of money spent on groceries in the world, right? So if you were buying from us, you were buying from somewhere else beforehand. And so we always have seen the major grocery players as our competition. And I don't think that's any different today.
When the pandemic hit, a lot of people were wary of going to grocery stores. And Imperfect Foods offered this solution in that groceries could be delivered to your house. And on a subscription level, they would be delivered on a regular basis um, and in the kind of manner that people were comfortable with. That being said, that must have been a huge logistical challenge for you. Talk about how you navigated those first few months of COVID and how you were able to get to a point where it actually ended up benefiting the company.
Yeah, I mean, I think COVID was a crazy time for all businesses, and Imperfect Foods was no exception. I think when the reality of the pandemic set in, the first thing we thought about was, okay, how do we keep our employees safe? And the second thing was, oh my God, we're have become a lifeline for people's food. And I think like we were always a grocery company, but it's not until COVID, hit and we were getting these messages like, oh my God, my order's a day late, what's going on, that we realized like how much we really were an essential service and people depended on us. And I would say, so, the first thing is it was incredibly hard to operate. We had to redesign all of our warehouses to keep people safe, space people out. I don't even want to tell you what the cost of the hand sanitizer was during those early days of the pandemic. And yeah.
Why don't you share that? How much was that? How much did you guys have to spend on
I
hand
don't know the
sanitizer?
exact number, but hundreds of thousands of dollars, right?
Wow.
I think we knew that not for only for our customers, but for our employees, we had to keep everybody safe, and obviously we willingly paid that expense. But it definitely made operating a little bit hard. And all of a sudden, somebody was sick, and you had to quarantine, and it was it was a tough logistical challenge. But I would say the two things that really benefited us are one, with customers not feeling comfortable going into grocery stores, we were an online contactless solution that people could utilize to get their groceries. And so we saw a huge influx of new customers. But two, it really highlighted how broken our food system was. And we were able to take advantage of some opportunities from industries that are really hit hard. So for example, we recovered 250,000 pounds of fresh fish fillets from cruise ships, right? That were supposed to go to cruise ships that weren't happening, or 250,000 pounds of popcorn from movie theaters, right? Or I think there was some press article about it, but 30,000 snack trays from JetBlue, the cheese and crackers, right? And so we were able actually to step in and take this food that would have gone to waste and said, hey, we can get it out to customers instead.
And that is so amazing to hear. I never ever would have thought of that, all the popcorn that was going to be uneaten, or the cheese plates on an airline. Were you reaching out? Were you actively reaching out to some of these companies and industries saying, hey, we have a solution for this waste, or this food waste that you're going to encounter?
Yeah, some of it we reached out through existing relationships we had, and some reached out to us because we had been known as a place where you could be a clearinghouse for product that would go to waste, but was still perfectly good for consumers. And so it was kind of a two-way street.
Yeah. So earlier you had mentioned that as the company evolved, as the brand evolved, it evolved from produce to meats and poultry to branded items as well. Talk about the evolution of your product selection and how you think about incorporating branded items into your product selection.
The reason for expanding into items beyond produce was twofold. One was that we always knew that there was a huge amount of food going to waste in other parts of the food system beyond just the produce. And I mentioned like the broken pretzels as one example. But two is customers were starting to tell us, hey, if you just carried X, Y, Z, right? Like chicken, eggs, milk, I wouldn't have to go to the grocery store at all. And it's kind of silly that I'm making a trip every week to get those items when I could just be sitting home. And because of the way we do our routing, it's kind of intricate with our delivery vans, where we deliver to a whole neighborhood all in one day. It's actually, according to the EPA, 50% more efficient than if everybody drove to the store individually. And so part of it was just customers telling us, like, I want to do all of my shopping with you. And I think the thing that really prompted the branded items is that they trusted Imperfect, right? Like they didn't trust us to sell other brands. They really trusted us to sell our brand and to go out there and know what was being wasted in the marketplace and know that it was going to be good quality. And so that's why we really expanded kind of the Imperfect line of products.
Someone might say, well, if you're aligned with Imperfect, that must mean that your brand is imperfect or your products are imperfect. So I think that can be kind of difficult to convince a brand to sign on with you guys. Maybe not. Has there ever been that sort of disconnect between, hey, we're working with Organic Valley, selling their half and half. Is this half and half, going to expire in a week, or is there something wrong with the package, et cetera? Have you run into that problem?
Yeah, we haven't run into it too much, and we try and be really clear on our website and in description what is kind of an imperfect item and what just might be a first quality item that we carry because we want to have it like half and half every week. But it's a lot of the reasons why we also work through the Imperfect brand, because sometimes these companies want to kind of stay in the background a little bit, right? And they've worked hard to cultivate the idea that their brand is the first quality stuff. But they also recognize that food's going to waste and there needs to be a market for it. And so they'd rather work through the Imperfect brand than their own branded product. And that's why you see a lot of our brand products.
A lot of the products you're carrying now, though, are not necessarily big brands. I mean, some of them are very, very new, early stage disruptive brands, have some sort of innovation component to them. And, the variety that you carry is pretty remarkable. How do you work with early stage brands to get their products into your portfolio?
Yeah, I would say it definitely goes both directions. And I would say that one of the inefficiencies of the food system that is not often known is that new brands have the bar for getting into grocery stores has become really high, and you basically have to pay to play at this point. And so you have to pay to get on the shelf. And so new brands have a really hard time, and they also have a really hard time when they're innovating with new flavors that might not sell as well as they expected. And so we've kind of tried to reach out to the community to tell them that we are a place where you can innovate with new flavors, where you can get on the shelf without having to pay, and you can give us products that might be getting close to expiration because they didn't sell as well as you thought. And so we've definitely made proactive outreach to that community.
And in some cases, they're a little bit more established brands that I've seen, some of their new products, and they, I've bought them from Imperfect Foods where, the expiration date was, fine for months. It wasn't even close to expiration date. I'm thinking of Nona Lim in particular with their pad thai kit. And Nona Lim has been a brand that's been on your product selection for a long time. I mean, are they looking at Imperfect Foods as a way, or some of these brands looking at Imperfect Foods as a way to bring awareness to new products, to bring awareness to their innovation?
I would say sometimes yes, and sometimes similarly they're working with new flavors that didn't sell as well as they could. But also sometimes we just work with kind of really sustainable brands in the mainstream that align with our values, and it's another outlet for them to sell at, and it gives our customers some consistency to know that will be there every week.
Yeah, on the former, I think it's I remember Brew Doctor, you guys working closely with them on a new kombucha flavor where they had already pre-printed the cans, or they pre-labeled these cans of a product that they had discontinued, and it just took another label. I forget what they call it. What do they call it? Pressure sensitive label, also known as a sticker, that they put around the can for this new Imperfect Foods and Brew Doctor collaboration, which was amazing. Amazing to taste, and amazing that you guys were able to do that together. That being said, the pricing model is something where I don't fully understand the pricing matrix and how you guys go about determining what you should be charging for, say, peaches versus a 4-pack of kombucha. Can you talk about your pricing strategy?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's a combination of a few different factors. So one is, what we're able to get that product from the farmer or from the manufacturer. But we also are doing store checks on a pretty weekly basis in every market with the local grocery stores to make sure we're price competitive, because one of our value propositions is that we're going to be affordable. And so we're always looking at the grocery stores to say, hey, can we be more affordable? And can we really beat them on price in these items? Because that's part of our promise to our customer. And sometimes it's also a conversation with brands where we say, look, we're going to have to be the best price out there because we're known as kind of a discount store where you can get products at a really affordable price. And so we have to, let's position this price. Let's both work together to position this price. That's going to be really unbeatable.
Well, I'm going to challenge you there, Ben,
Go for it.
because just this past week, I was looking at prices at Whole Foods versus Imperfect Foods. And in a couple of cases, Whole Foods was less expensive. But I was okay with that. And I was okay with that because A, the products were going to be delivered to my home, and it was going to be essentially all the groceries, as you mentioned. I could get everything at once, in one box. And B, that you guys had proved to me that the quality was going to be there. Whole Foods is known for great quality produce. And so I think over time, I just realized that, well, Imperfect and Whole Foods are pretty close, if not the same, in terms of the quality I'm going to get. But the product, some of the items were, a little bit more expensive on your site.
Yeah, and without knowing the specifics, I imagine it was not intentional, to be honest. And we can never be perfect in the pricing, but we're always working to make sure we're sharpening our pricing, because we don't want that experience, to be totally honest. Like, we always want to be beating Whole Foods, and to be honest, since they got taken over by Amazon, they've been driving down prices pretty consistently, and even potentially taking a loss on some of those items. But we want to be more affordable than Whole Foods for sure, and so that's where we're striving towards.
When I think about the sort of overall mission of your company, I think about what the potential is versus, will Imperfect be acquired by Amazon? I think about Imperfect as, being able to, can you replicate this type of business in Europe, or South America or Asia? What would you say is the overall goal here? How do you build this company so that it achieves the things that you wanted to achieve at the outset, without the assistance of M&A?
I would say that we never thought about acquisition when we built this company. I'm not sure we even thought about exit, to be honest. We just thought about building a great company that was going to endure. And so we designed everything the way we wanted to do it, right? So we have our own drivers that are our employees that deliver the box to your door every week. And that's not really right for an acquisition, but we knew that was going to be providing the best service to the customer. And we tried outsourcing it, and it couldn't maintain our quality standards. And so we basically focused on how to build a great company and not worry about what was going to happen in the end. But I think you kind of hit it, that this was not like we were getting really good at technology, so we get acquired by Amazon, or really good at operations, so we get acquired by Walmart. We built everything. We operate our own warehouses, we operate our own software, we operate our own drivers. I mean, pretty much as soon as it leaves the farm, we're in control of it to your door. And that was really meant to be a standalone company.
Yeah, a lot of times when companies are acquired, the new owner will take a look at everything and say, we can be more efficient here, or we can streamline this part of the business with that part of the business, or we can achieve greater economies of scale based on our buying power. Are there ways that you're learning from the big guys how to implement those efficiencies now, in a way that keeps you competitive with the big guys, so that you don't necessarily have to look at them as being a potential acquirer?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, we're always looking at what competitors are doing. And I would say, as we've grown and brought over people to our team who have experience with bigger companies, we've learned some of the kind of tricks of the trade in terms of how to compete on scale. And as we've grown as well, we've been able to kind of realize those efficiencies of scale and negotiate better with suppliers as well. So I would say we're getting close, but we knew we were never going to be able to compete on scale with certain retailers like Walmart, for example. And so as a result, that's why we did things like having a very limited product offering, so we could have higher volume on a per SKU basis, for example. And so we had to do other things to get creative to kind of manufacture those efficiencies of scale, I would say.
What was an example, or what's an example?
Yeah, the limited SKUs is a really good example there. And so, a typical grocery store carries 40,000 items. A Trader Joe's carries about 5,000. We carry about 300, although we're growing that, and it'll be at about 1,000 pretty soon. And what that means is that every item turns over really quickly. And so we're actually like a certain manufacturer might sell 6 units per store, like literally like 6 bags of chips per store per week. And that's a good week for them. And we can move through 2,000, a whole pallet in a week, because it's the only potato chip on our shelf. right? And so by working with, we might carry one milk brand or one egg brand, for example. And so by working with those limited SKUs, we're able to get kind of the buying power of a much larger company from each producer because we're not spreading it out.
As you are increasing your product selection from 300 to 1,000, how many of those products are going to be branded items versus in-house private label imperfect food offerings?
Yeah, I would say within 5 years, we want around 70 or 80% of those to be our own label. I would say, I think we're currently at about, don't hold me to this, we're currently about 15 or 20%, and we're trying to grow that to about 30 to 40% over the next year. But of all the new items, most of them are going to be coming in with the Imperfect brand on them.
You had until recently been the chief innovation officer of the company as well. What does innovation mean to you? Does it mean really focusing on ways that you can introduce new private label items to your customers, or is it working with innovative brands?
I would say it's a little bit of both. Innovation for us meant getting out of the day-to-day and thinking more in the 6-month, 2-year, 3-year time frame, and really planning for projects that cut across departments. So like launching grocery, for example, was one of the projects we did. I would say that we will launch with partner with innovative brands when we think they're doing something really special in the market, but we always have a bias for doing it ourselves just because we've built up that customer trust. And we heard from customers that they prefer when it's under our brand. If there is a standout company that really resonates with our values and aligns with our values and our customers, we'll obviously work with them, but we really do prefer to do it under our brand.
Ben, you come across as a really confident leader and someone who has a strong commitment to their vision. How does that jive with, raising the amounts of money that you've raised from private equity firms that are looking for a return on investment that might not be in line with that mission that you have, that drive that you have to change the world, to do good on a very, very big scale?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I actually, despite being a strong-willed person, I like to think of myself as someone who's willing to compromise. But I would say we did look for investors that were very much aligned in our social mission. And while they might not all, be altruistic, I would say, they all understood that our social mission was part of what attracted customers to us. And if they were going to make a lot of money, we were going to have to stay true to that social mission. And so I think that's really how we vetted our investors on both the venture capital and private equity side. And if anyone said, hey, I think you should get rid of the social mission, it's not good for customers, we just knew they didn't understand the business. And so that was kind of a natural gate for us.
Well, that would be a strange thing for them to ask. Let's get rid of our social mission, given that's why you started the company in the first place. So that being said, how do you see yourself as continuing upon this mission of eradicating or at least greatly reducing food waste as it relates to your own personal goals and then that of the company?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think from the company perspective, continuing to focus on fighting food waste, and obviously the more we grow, the more food we can prevent from going to waste. And we've also started to take on kind of single-use plastics as one of the things we're trying to reduce in the long run. It's not going to be a short-term journey, but another impact we can have on the environment. On a personal perspective, I mean, I think I'm continuing to fight food waste in my personal life, but I also, there's a few causes I'm passionate about. I actually currently work for a graduate school affiliated with Northeastern, where I live, and focus on helping underrepresented founders start ventures. And so passing on to the next generation of entrepreneurs. So I think that there's a few causes I want to continue to pursue in my life, and I'm lucky enough to have hopefully a long life ahead of me to be able to pursue those passions, beyond just food waste.
Well, Ben, as I mentioned at the top of our conversation, you are still quite young, and it seems like there's a great runway for you to do whatever you want to do going forward. But in the meantime, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure talking about our journey, and always enjoy sharing the story.